Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew and grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day and in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. Until Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all and made him king of all wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." Get all the picture. I like this one. He's got a big grin on his face. Ooh, he's riding that one. "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around, from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. And so he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said no. The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. All right, let's read, if I can do it without getting the sun on the pictures. Let's read The Rainbow Goblins. Take a look at the end papers of this one. Look at that. The Rainbow Goblins by Ulderico. Once there was a land that lived in fear of 7 goblins. They were called the Rainbow Goblins, and each had their own color, which was also their name: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Yellow, being the craftiest, was their chief. The goblins lived on color. They prowled the valleys and climbed the highest mountains looking for rainbows. And when they found one, they caught it in their lassos, sucked the colors out of it, and filled their bellies with its bright liquid. Only one place in the land had never known goblin fear, the hidden valley called the Valley of the Rainbow, where the great arches of color were born. There, the animals still lived in paradise. But the rainbow goblins had heard tales of this valley, and their mouths watered whenever they thought of the feast that awaited them there. And so they gathered up their lassos and their pails and set off. Here is the Valley of the Rainbow. With great effort, the goblins made their way over the jagged piles of rock that guarded the entrance. When the climbing became difficult, Yellow roared, "Don't lose heart, comrades! Think of the delicious colors ahead!" Now, you can see the Valley of the Rainbow way over here, but you can also see the goblins right here. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. The sun had almost set by the time they reached their goal, the very meadow where the rainbow sprang to life. Immediately beneath the meadow, they found a cave. "We'll spend the night here," the yellow goblin commanded. I'm going to back up. You can see them in the cave. When the moon rose and saw them warming themselves around the fire they had lit, it shouted out in alarm, "The rainbow goblins are in the valley! The rainbow goblins are in the valley!" The trees and the bushes took up the cry, and the flowers and the grasses and the animals and the waters passed it on, and by midnight, the evil tidings had spread throughout the land. The goblins could hardly contain their excitement. "Soon all the colors of the rainbow will be ours," Yellow gloated. "We'll snatch it as it rises," said Green, "when the colors are still fresh and creamy." The blue goblin cackled. "Look at the roots dangling from the walls. They're straining to hear our plans. A lot of good it will do them, or their friend, the rainbow." You can see all the goblins in the cave, and you can see the roots dangling. Finally, exhausted by their scheming, the goblins fell asleep. Outside, the moon shone on the mirror-like surface of the water, and its magical light was reflected into the cave. You can see them, you can see their pots of color. Then all 7 goblins had a wonderful dream, the same wonderful dream about the paradise of Rainbow Land, where all you had to do was lie on your back and open your mouth, and the most succulent colors dripped down your throat. Well, the dream went on, and the greedy goblins drank, and at dawn, just as their bellies were about to burst, they were awakened by a distant clap of thunder. The goblins sprang to their feet and rushed to the mouth of the cave. "A storm! A storm!" Red shouted. Look how the wind is driving it toward us," Orange cried. And all the goblins danced and pranced about in glee, for they knew that after the wildest morning thunderstorm comes the most beautiful rainbow. Yellow was so proud of his plan of attack that he went over it again while each goblin tested their lasso. "Red, don't forget that you must seize the left flank." "And I move in on the right," the violet goblin burst out excitedly. And before the last roll of thunder had faded from the valley, the goblins took up their pails and lassos, and they marched single file out of the cave. The sight that greeted them when they reached the meadow took their breath away. The rising arch of the rainbow, so rich with color and promise, almost blinded them. Trembling with excitement, Trembling with excitement, Yellow finally managed to give the signal to attack. The goblins swung their lassos round and around and hurled them into the sky. But at that same instant, the rainbow vanished, as if it had been swallowed up by the earth. The goblins were dumbfounded. Nothing like this had ever happened to them before. They stared up at their empty, outstretched lassos, which a second later snapped back at them. Indigo wept, Blue cursed, Yellow stumbled, Orange cried out, "Treachery!" Violet tumbled to the grass, Red raged, but the more they thrashed about, the more tangled up they became in their own lassos, until they had snarled themselves into a grunting, groaning mass of goblins on the ground. And as they lay there helplessly, a flood of colors poured forth from all the flowers of the meadow. "The flowers!" screamed the blue goblin. "The flowers!" He suddenly remembered the dangling roots he had made fun of in the cave. Through their roots, the flowers had heard the goblins' plan, and they had devised a counterplan to save the rainbow. The moment the attack was launched, the flowers had drained the colors of the rainbow into their petals. And as soon as the goblins became ensnared in their lassos, the petals had let loose the deluge. And so the goblins drowned in the colors they had come to steal, and no one in the valley wept for them. The rainbow itself was reborn more magnificently than ever, and out of gratitude it lifted up the flowers that had saved it and transformed them into glittering dragonflies and butterflies and splendidly plumed birds. But since that time, the rainbow has become more cautious. Now, when it arches across the sky, it is careful not to touch the earth anywhere. No matter how you try to sneak up on it, you can never come to the place where it begins or ends. That is the story of the Rainbow Goblins. And at the very end, the author drew a picture of himself and his dog, which is kind of fun. And there's also a little goblin in there. There's a ladybug up here. And if you look closely, you can find the goblin. I'll let you look. And I'm going to point it out now. It's right here, peeking out through the knothole. Thanks, you guys. See you next time.